stand up for yourself, and I'll back you up, 'cause problems don't solve themselves. I'll tell you what, instead of would or could, I think you should draw a line in the sand and stand your ground. It's for your own good.
Hello. I want to welcome you back for another episode of The Voice of Families and Addiction. My name is Roy Poyan. I'm your host, and I'm joined today by Rex the Renaissance Man.
Salud. Salud.
Glad to have you. Thanks so much for
always good
all
to
that
be
you're
here.
doing here. Hey, I wanted to ask you, what are we doing? I mean, it was cold this week. It was 5 degrees. Why are we doing this? These episodes.
To be honest, we have no other choice but to deal with the weather, but we're doing these episodes basically to give closure to those who need understanding when it comes to managing themselves at being a highly effective person. So, even through the discomfort of, the weather that we're, living in, we're showing up. That's what we're doing. And that's the most important thing, is to show up for yourself.
I would agree with you. And it's a nice analogy with the weather. In life,
Yeah,
we have all these obstacles.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, let's face it. We could have easily have said, Rex, let's wait till next week or 2 weeks from now. We'll do the
yeah.
next episode. But and it's not a statement of like our commitment to the listening audience. It's a statement to the material.
It's discipline.
Yeah. And the roles that we play, and how we prioritize our time, and how are we centered? We learned that in last week. That family centered, work centered, money centered.
And then,
you and I were talking before.
Yeah.
About that.
And then we got to principle centered.
Yeah.
So.
And how valuable principle centered is.
Right. And that's what we're operating in right now is, of course, there are other determining factors that are around us. I mean, other contributing factors, not determining, but contributing factors that could affect, our attendance of being here. But we determine whether we're going to show up or not.
Well, I guess we're asking the audience too.
Definitely.
We're asking everybody out there that's listening or watching this. We want you to show up.
Yes.
Trust me, the whole purpose of doing this is that you show up to yourself.
Yes. Show up for yourself and then show up for those around you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And I guess that we're going to discuss it today. So we'll
Absolutely.
start off, and we're encouraging you to put the Stephen Covey 7 Habits of Highly Effective People as a book in front of you.
Yes.
And follow along. So we're actually on page, what is it, 145?
146.
146,
Yes,
yes.
sir.
And we're still in private victory.
Yes.
You'll see by his chart, be proactive is 1, begin with the end in mind was 2.
Mm-hmm.
And now this is the last, which is 3, put first things first.
Yes.
I guess in a sense, the title kind of describes the content, doesn't
Definitely. Yeah. And people have a hard time with personal management because oftentimes I hear people say, "Oh, I don't have time."
Right.
No, you do have time. You're just not making the time. You're not managing the time.
Or they say, I don't have the resources to do it.
They do. It's
Yeah.
you have it around you, but you also have it within you.
It's like, come on, everybody.
Right.
Let's get real. No, this is a come to yourself, and hopefully Jesus is there with you
Yes.
because you're bringing them with him. You're asking him to be
Right.
a part of this. But the fact is, you need to create a generational chain to who you were, who you are, and who you want to become.
Yes.
And the best way to do that is through the habits
Yes.
that you develop. And this is habit number 3. So let's get to work here because it is a lot of work. And I'm going to ask us to start to take a look at the matrix is probably one of the biggest things. But before I do that, is there anything that you wanted to mention as a lead into what is
Sure.
this matrix about?
So prior to us getting even deeper into this, at the beginning, from 146 to 147, it basically states that, A, you are the creator.
Right.
You have to identify yourself to know, okay, this is who I am, but now it's time for me to create. The second part is the mental creation.
Right.
Once you have that vision in your mind, then it's time to physically create.
So you create it twice then.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Before you take action, you want to have a plan.
Right.
Right. And like I stated before, in the first book of the Bible,
Yeah.
like I said, Yahweh, God, Allah, whatever you may call the Most High, was a creator, a creative.
Right.
And Yahweh always had that idea of what he wanted the world, heaven, and everything around it to be, and then he acted upon it.
It's an awesome
Yeah.
thought. I mean, let's face it.
And he
Talk
ma-
about a role.
Yes, and he managed it all in what we would say 7 days. But what I've learned is one day in our world is 1,000 years in his world, for sure.
Right. Yeah, God knows no time.
Yes,
Well, with this in mind, we're not living in that.
No.
I mean, we are in a sense, but in our eternity. But
Right.
we're of the world, and therefore there are these time limitations, and we're based on a clock.
yes,
So, given the fact that there are things that we want to hold ourselves accountable to in our awareness of self, Stephen Covey is saying, "Hey, listen, let's break down what you're dealing with." Because isn't that it? A mother's getting the kids ready, getting them out to school. The father's sitting there, can't find his keys. This is the morning rush.
Right.
They have priorities. They've got standards. They're principles oriented. They're being proactive.
Yes.
They do have the end in mind of why they're doing all this thing every day. To build on the family and to build the family experience and to build their self experience. But it's stressful.
yeah, because they're operating in anxiety.
Well, is that a difference? I mean,
There's a difference between anticipation and anxiety. See, anticipation is really you are setting your mind on something that is going to produce a favorable outcome. And then anxiety is the opposite, which is you are focused on what is going to give you an undesirable outcome. So, what Stephen R. Covey was talking about was to, organize and execute around your priorities by focusing on the things that are important but not urgent.
okay.
And that's where he breaks down those quadrants.
So important might be it's a value statement,
Definitely.
and urgent might be based on a timeline,
Yes.
but weighted with how important it really is.
Exactly.
Because it's urgent.
Yes.
Okay. So let's step back, everybody.
Okay.
And freeze frame and say, what we're trying to do is to create a new habit that's oriented towards urgency and the degree of importance.
Yes.
So now we're going to look at our life that way, aren't we?
Yes. And he had a great point in there. And I can say before I read this book, I was already acting on it. Because at first I was acting out of anxiety. I'm like, okay, I need to get this done right now. But instead of planning day by day, plan 1 week, ahead. So basically at the top of the week, it could be Sunday.
Right.
You can organize your priorities, but don't let your tool don't be a slave to your tool. That's what he said. Don't be a slave to the tool. Be the master of the tool.
Right. You decide how the hammer is going to hit the nail.
Exactly.
The angle of the head of the hammer will determine how it's going to physically drive that nail down into the wood.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. Well, then let's go ahead and start to take a look at the tool that he's given us.
Yes.
Nice lead in. And that's this matrix. And I'm sorry that I don't have something that I can draw, in terms of a physical box, but we'll think of this as being 4 boxes and then thereby offering us in each box a place to say, okay, as a header, it's urgent or it's not urgent.
Right.
It's important or it's not important. And rather than me kind of like doing this in the air for you, it's really important that you have the book in front of you. And you'll start to see that this is described on page 151.
Yes.
So it's time management matrix of not important, important, and then it's urgency. Why don't you, if you would, we'll break this up. Why don't you handle 1 and 2, and I'll describe 3 and 4.
Copy.
Okay.
All right. Starting with 1, to be urgent but important, the activities are crisis, pressing problems, deadline-driven projects. For quadrant 2, for not urgent but important, you have prevention, PC activities, relationship building, recognizing new opportunities, and planning/recreation.
Planning. Begin with the end in mind.
Yes,
Yeah, be proactive.
very much so.
Okay, so that kind of falls into two. Boy, I see that number. The number one, I almost start to get anxious myself just thinking about.
Yeah.
You think a lot of people falsely conclude that this is so important. Really, it's not. I need to do this, but really, you don't have to do it right now.
Right.
And they're not evaluating how important is it, and how much time do I really have. But if I get it done now, I won't have to worry about it later. Yeah, but if you parse it back a little bit, it might belong in box 2.
Right, right.
And not so much in this high anxiety box 1. I imagine some people, especially people that are underperforming but are exhausted by the fact that they're trying to perform well, are doing so in quadrant 1.
Yes. I was talking to somebody yesterday night about this very lesson right here.
Okay.
And I actually took a lot of weight off her shoulders to help her understand this is the quadrant that you're in. This is the
Right.
quadrant that you want to be in.
Yes.
But it's all about how you manage your time, how you consolidate,
Okay.
your priorities.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what falls back on, I hate to keep going backwards, but beginning with the end in mind, what are you trying to achieve?
Exactly.
What are you trying to become?
Yeah.
And how are you centered? What are you centered on? That's creating a draw towards all of your energies and all your thoughts. Boy, I'll tell you what, I really don't want to make this sound metaphysical and fluffy and, the age of Aquarius. Sorry, my generation.
No, go ahead,
not
take
yours.
your time.
I won't sing for you right now. We'll leave the fifth dimension out of this. And then you start to say, well, okay, so not urgent. Well, but there's a lot of things in my life that I feel are urgent. I know they're a degree of importance, but I guess for me, personally, the urgency falls into more of a challenge for me.
Yes.
Well, how much time will it take for me to get this done so it doesn't become a box 1
Right.
crisis?
I got a good example for you.
Okay.
This book, we've been meeting weekly.
Yes.
And let's say this chapter, maybe I think it's like 40 pages,
Right. This was a long one.
I broke it down to where I said, you know what? I know I can clear 20 pages in a day,
Okay.
but I read the entire chapter within one day,
Okay.
then read it again to gain better understanding. So it was like I set a goal,
Yes.
but I surpassed the goal.
Did you do that by beginning with the end in mind?
Definitely.
I wanted to be prepared when I came here.
Definitely.
I wanted to be able to offer the audience the best I can do.
Yes.
And that's because you're principle centered.
Yes. Yes.
So a lot of these things from the previous episodes, and I want to bring this into this conversation because I want our listening audience to have this conversation with themselves.
Yes.
Once again, let's get real here. This is a great way to create very foundational habits that if you're aware of what they are, and you can sit there and say, I am looking for victories. I'm looking for a private victory, which I don't need other people's input on and satisfaction to. And then I'm looking for a public victory where I get to take the best of me and bring it into the
Yes.
world, or bring it into my relationships or work.
Because now you're living it, you're applying it.
Yeah. Talk to me about the idea of living, Rex. Living it.
The idea of living it, before I even got in here, I was making a segment, and I basically identified the difference between being smart and intelligent, the difference between being ignorant and stupid.
Fair enough.
Once you come from being ignorant to being, let's say, smart, how you apply the answers that you have identify your wisdom.
Wow. I like that. And I think it's very true.
Because on one side of the spectrum, you could either be stupid or you could be intelligent.
Yeah.
Not applying those answers, yes, you're stupid. Applying those answers, you are intelligent. And the more that you apply those answers, you are now deemed as being wise.
I guess in the application, or maybe another way of looking at application, not clearly defined, is sharing.
Yes.
That almost increases the value of your wisdom.
Yes.
I mean, your wisdom to yourself is like,
Yes.
so what? You're a wise person. Good. Go sit under a tree and enjoy yourself. But when you make the difference in my life because of what you shared with me that I can then use,
Definitely.
that's wisdom.
Definitely.
That's wisdom in application. And it's
Yes.
almost like God wants us to share the love that he gives to us. And he gives us so much love. It's like this cup. It overflows.
Yes.
And he just keeps pouring his love in. He promises that he'll never stop doing that.
Right.
It's like, wow, an ever-filling cup of love that overflows.
Right.
Well, if I can always count on this cup to keep filling, why don't I take the overflow and give it away?
Exactly. My point exactly of why the conversation that I had last night, I have enough wisdom to share
Right.
to where it does not take from me because I've created a great habit.
So that's why we showed up today.
Yes.
I mean, let's face it. There's a lot of snow outside right now, and last night it was 3 degrees.
We didn't make an excuse.
No, but the
At all.
fact, you're right, we didn't. And I don't mean to sit here and say, wow, Roy and Rex spent half the show telling us what a great people they are. That's not the point. But with that in mind, when we start to look at the box one, I think that it's going to be to our advantage if you would go and purchase this book also.
Expeditiously.
Yes, Highly Effective People. It's a personal workbook by Stephen R. Covey. And in it, each of the chapters gives you exercises on how you can apply the lessons. And it, go ahead.
Sorry, I have to interrupt when you start there, just because this is our, and I don't want you to have to read the whole thing and start your, so I can't have you say that you need to purchase it.
Oh,
Describe the book earlier was great, but because we're like a public government channel, and we can't promote anything that's not a nonprofit, and we can't tell you to go buy this or
okay.
go to this business and buy things, so just start that phrase,
Yeah, so we could cut it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I encourage you
Okay.
to grab this book.
So there's an area that I think that would really benefit us from. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to read off an assessment, and we can kind of follow through.
Copy.
It's only 8 categories, but it'll help us to see where we fall in these boxes.
Yes.
So I realize that you didn't have this this particular publication.
That's
but
okay.
With that in mind, I spend most of my time, and everybody, if you would, get out a piece of paper, and it's going to be a scale from 1 to 6. Strongly disagree is 1, and 6 means strongly agree. And I'll let you decide, where you are between 1 and 6 on this. I spend most of my time on important activities that demand my immediate attention, such as crises, pressing problems, and deadline-driven projects. 1 to 6. Are you doing that? Don't pass judgment on it, just mark it down. I feel I am always putting out fires and working in a crisis mode. 1 to 6. Do you find yourself doing that a lot? Number 3, I feel as if I wasted a lot of time. 1 to 6. I spend much of my time on activities that have little relevance to my top priorities, but demand my immediate attention. Needless interruptions, unimportant meetings, non-critical phone calls, and emails. Boy, how often do we live that one? 1 to 6. In other words, do you find yourself agreeing with that or disagreeing it? If you strongly disagree, then that's a 1. If you strongly agree, then that's a 6. I spend most of my time on activities important but not urgent, such as planning. Meaning you're always planning, you're preparing, and you're preventing, you're setting up prevention, relationship building, self-renewal. 1 to 6. I spend much of my time on busy work, compulsive habits, junk mail, gaming, scrolling through, maybe on Marketplace trying to find things. 1 to 6. Here's number 7. I feel I am on top of things because of careful preparation, planning, and prevention. If you feel like you're on top of things because on careful preparation, then mark that I strongly disagree 1, or I strongly agree, meaning 6. And then the last one, I feel I am constantly addressing issues that are important to others, but not to me. 1 to 6. So now here's why we did that, those 8 categories. In questions 1 and 2, if you scored high, then you're living your life in quadrant 1, which we've identified as being stress, burnout, crisis management. Now remember, that's the one that basically had it in the descriptions. I'm always putting out fires. I'm dealing with crises. I'm dealing with problems. Boy, you meet some people, and I'm going to say, you see it a lot in everybody's life. For some reason, in poorer families, it just seems to hit really hard because they don't have that margin that's afforded when you have a little bit more wealth. And I'm not. There's no judgment there. I'm just saying this is a very broad stroke
Definitely.
statement.
Definitely.
And then what we're doing is we're looking at, well, then questions 5 and 7. 5 was on the area of I spend much of my time on activities that are important but not urgent, and 7 being I feel I'm on top of things. I'm prepared. I know what's going to happen next, and I'm ready for it. Well, then that falls into quadrant 2. So if you find yourself scoring high, like you mark those 4, 5, or 6 on questions 5 and 7, then that's where you're living your life. And then in the other 2, which we're going to still come into and address, which is quadrant 3, then we're looking at 4 and 8. 4 was I spend most of my time on activities that have little relevance to my top priorities. And then 8 was I feel I'm constantly addressing issues that are not important to me. You know, it almost seems like a dog box, you know, like you're in the doghouse there. You're not really getting much done in quadrant 3. And oddly enough, in quadrant 3, that would register as not important, but urgent. So you're doing things that aren't very important to you, but you're treating them as though they're urgent.
Exactly.
And that's like meetings that you're
Always-
attending.
Always trying to put out a fire.
Yeah. Which is what leads you to quadrant 1. And then quadrant 4 is question 3. And then I feel as if I wasted a lot of time. And that is, it's not important and it's not urgent. Phone calls, pleasant activities, trivia, busy work, a lot of emails. And we tend to think, oh, well, I answered a lot of emails today. You know,
means
well,
nothing.
okay, but that's not living in quadrant 2. So Rex, is our goal to live in quadrant 2?
It better be.
Fair enough. Okay. So let's get down to how Stephen Covey kind of describes to us the thought of what we do and how it impacts us in terms of how we see our roles in life.
Yes.
Kind of like who are we accounted to and how do we define that accountability?
So
Describe for me roles.
roles, it could be one of them is personal, next is professional, then it is, you know, okay, what is your role in society, or let's say church or something like that.
Okay. So as a member of a church.
Exactly. So based on whatever your position is and whatever, you know, world you're in, that's how you manage your priorities first and foremost.
Okay, it's based
And-
around your roles.
Yeah, and he created a nice
on
chart
page
that I looked at.
164.
Yes. It started on, there's a chart on 166.
Boy, this chart is excellent.
Definitely.
I mean, this is a game changer.
Right. So the first one is individual, personal, then him as a husband and a father, next as a manager. And he's a manager of several different things, and then all the way down to the bottom, United Way chairman. And I'm not going to lie, I wanted to copy this part of the book because I said eventually I'm going to get to that point in my life where I'm going to need to use this. But right now, my method is pretty effective.
Good.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, if you got something that works with you, then work your plan.
Definitely.
This is actually a daytimers kind of concept. So as we start to plan our day, Stephen Covey challenges us to say, make priorities according to your roles,
Yes.
not according to what you think are your urgent items. Whoa, that's really a paradigm shift. Oh, we talked about paradigm shifts in our first meeting about being proactive
Right.
and how we use kind of a way of looking at things. The
Right.
beautiful woman or the old woman in the ink diagram.
And he's-
So with that in mind, we're now having to sit there and say, so our first consideration is roles. Then what we have to do, and we apply our centeredness. Wow, this is pretty busy work.
Well, it's easy to manage it once you take your mind out of trying to manage your priorities, but manage yourself.
Oh,
Yes.
that's the key. So if we look at ourself and our values
Yes.
and then our roles, I
Yes.
mean, I'm a husband, I'm a father. At one point, I was a hockey coach. I was for junior kids. I was a scoutmaster. I was a district sales manager at pharmaceuticals. I mean, my roles shifted, and then I became a sales director in a corporation, a new startup in robotics. So now I had to learn all about robotics in order to help my sales team.
Right.
You know, I had this role that changed on me, but I was cognitive of it, you know. And fortunately, at that time, I was using Covey. So when I would sit there and say, okay, what's going on this week? Well, I'm going to be in Missouri, I'm going to be over in Illinois, and I got to grab these people to go do that. Oh, yeah, Jeff's got a soccer game, you know, and we've got a dinner engagement on Friday when I'm back in town with my wife.
Right.
All these different, like, roles. Then I looked at what is urgent and what is important,
That part.
but I looked at the roles first.
Yes.
I don't think many people do that, or subconsciously they do it.
I hope this applies, but what you do is not who you are. Who you are identifies who you are, but what you do is just a task. So,
Okay,
yes.
yeah, it's the production of production and principle, which Stephen Covey does mention.
Yes.
On a balancing beam, you know, are we producing something? Is it principle weighted, oriented towards,
Yes.
you know, what is going to be our end result?
Definitely.
So with that in mind, we look at 168, page 168, and he's talking about it's a mission statement. Okay, we talked about
Yes.
that, roles, and then goals.
Yes.
Long term. But short term,
It's roles, goals, and then your plans.
okay, now I'm getting out of rehab, and I'm going to hit my family, and they're looking at me like, you stole mom's opal ring, you know, while you were in addiction. And now I've got to set up a whole new set of roles. I'm coming out of incarceration. My whole reputation, my identity has been taken from me. Everything's been taken from me. And now I'm put back into society. Wow, what a shock that is. I have to figure out what my roles are.
So, start off with, okay, what are the things you value since you've been released from rehab?
Right.
What is now important to you?
What is now is the key word that I'm going to pull
Yes.
from your statement.
Yes.
It's anew, isn't it?
Yes. It's your rebirth. It's your
Right.
second chance. And I like using this statement is, death is not the end. It's a doorway to a new beginning.
Right.
And you don't have to die physically.
Right.
You can die spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and be reborn again and take a better approach at whatever you did the
Right.
first time.
Right.
So,
I like that. I like that very much. Thanks for sharing that. I want to thank you very much for joining us today in this episode of The Voice of Families and Addiction.
Stand up for yourself, and I'll back you up. 'Cause problems don't solve themselves. I'll tell you what, instead of would or could, I think you should. Draw a line in the sand and stand your ground. It's for your own good.